Kadesh urachatz, karpas yachatz, magid rachatza, motzi matzah. Maror korech, shulchan orech, tzafun barech, halel yitzah. Kadesh urachatz, karpas yachatz, magid rachatza, motzi matzah. Maharor korech, shulchan orech, tzafun barech, halel yitzah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was so lovely. Shalom, everyone. Bruchim haba'im. Bruchot habaot. Welcome. I'm Rabbinic Pastor Cantor Levine on behalf of Aleph Alliance for Jewish Renewal and all of the organizations who sponsored tonight's Passover Earth Seder. I want to thank you for joining us. Seder means order, which refers to the set rituals we will follow tonight as we use this beautiful book called a haggadah, the promise of the land. If you don't have the haggadah, no worries. The Seder will unfold using beautiful music, blessings over ritual items, narration, stories, and gorgeous artwork by Galia Goodman. We will call the page numbers for those who do have the haggadah so you can follow along. Keep in mind that this is an abbreviated version of the actual book. Otherwise, we really would be here until midnight. This is our virtual Passover table. And although Zoom rooms have become second nature to most of us by now, we are dependent on technology. In fact, that song you just heard was zooming in from Sydney, Australia. Wow. So I beg you to be patient and forgiving. We'll do our best to end on time. Please be sure that you're muted at all times unless you're a participant, and please feel free to use the chat room as we move through the Seder to build our community and create sacred space for sharing. Thank you again for being with us tonight. Our host for this evening and the person who put all of this together is the author of The Promise of the Land, and I'm honored to introduce her now to you. Here is Rabbi Ellen Bernstein. Ellen, take it away.
Am I unmuted? Thank you. Am I unmuted? Hello? Do you hear me?
Hello? Yes, you sound beautiful. You look beautiful. Thank you.
So welcome everybody. I can't believe we're really doing this. It is such an honor to have you all come together to join me at this expansive table in the sky. I wanted to give you a little background of how we arrived here. Last year, I published an article about the opportunities that Zoom offered for celebrating Passover during a pandemic. I wrote, just think, you can lead a Seder with your musician friend who lives on the other side of the globe. So this year, when I was wondering whether or not to conduct a Zoom Passover Seder, I thought I should take my own advice. I emailed Cantor George Mordecai, who lives in Sydney on the other side of the globe, and said, want to lead a Zoom Passover Seder with me? And within 30 seconds, I received a one-word reply. Yes, exclamation point. So voila, here we are. I began conducting large earthy Seders in 1988 with an ecologically centered Seder for the Jewish holiday of Tu B'Shvat, the Jewish New Year of the Trees, in which at least a few of you at our grand table here participated. It was a beautiful festival of art, music, text, and fruits that took place in one of the boathouses in Philadelphia on the banks of the Schuylkill River and was attended by 200 guests. That Seder generated enormous energy and captured the imagination of many people and led to my founding of Shomrei Adamah, Keepers of the Earth, the first national Jewish environmental organization. I've always believed that our holidays are gifts to the world, like brilliant jewels on the necklace of the calendar year that can help inspire and sustain us in the work we need to do to ensure a healthy earth and a livable future. What I didn't know back then, and what took me decades to unravel for myself, was that Passover, Judaism's central holiday, also has a profound ecological message about our relation to land, to the earth. It's just that that message was lost to me until I realized, after many years of thinking about the place of land and earth in the Bible, that the central passage of the Passover Haggadah is also about land. The problem is that a couple of verses from this passage were left on the cutting room floor 2,000 years ago. So I had no idea that the tradition really understood that the freedom we celebrate on Passover depends on our relationship to the land, the earth. Once I realized this, I began to see the whole holiday in a deep ecological light. I retrieved those two verses and put them back in their proper place. Hence, this Haggadah, the promise of the land, and this idea of a Passover Earth Seder. Passover is also a holiday of gratitude, since we can never be free if our hearts are closed. So I want to begin our Seder with some expressions of gratitude. I am tremendously grateful to Aleph, the Alliance for Jewish Renewal, for being the primary sponsor of this event, and to Stephanie Bello, along with Cantor Lisa Levine, who worked tirelessly behind the scenes to pull so much of this together, and joined tonight by Laura Lennis to help with tech. And to Rabbi Daniel Swartz of Kojal for always saying yes to any of my requests. I'm deeply thankful to the many co-sponsors and so gratified by the presence of all the honorable guests at this table. I don't have time to thank anyone individually, but I do want to acknowledge a few who have devoted their entire careers to bringing forth ecological wisdom and practices. Rabbi Arthur Waskow, Rabbi David Seidenberg, and Dr. David Abram have been working in various ecologically centered domains for more than 30 years. And Nili Simhai, Shamu Sadeh, and Nigel Savage have been at it for more than 20 years. I think I can safely say for all of us that it has been a labor of love. One of the best ways that all of you can honor this evening is to support the work of the readers at the Seder table. Please check out their bios on the sheet that you all received and buy one of their books or CDs or bring them to your community to teach or join their organizations. I also invite you to engage with and support all of the sponsors of this event, and in particular, our host, Aleph, the Alliance for Jewish Renewal. Two last thank yous. I'm very grateful to the work of EcoPeace MiddleEast, the beneficiary organization of this event. EcoPeace is a unique collaboration of Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian environmentalists working together to protect scarce water resources and ensure a healthy future for all peoples in the Middle East. Finally, for this moment anyway, I also owe a huge debt of gratitude to Galia Goodman, who's the artist of the Haggadah and whose gorgeous work you will see displayed on the screen throughout the evening. So we begin our ritual as we do with any Jewish holiday with candle lighting and Hadassah, wine, Martin.
Hello. Okay, so we light candles to mark the end of a workday and the beginning of a holy day. Ordinary time gives way to sacred time, inviting us to see a new light. In many traditions, fire is a symbol of transformation. We circle our hands 3 times over the candles and bathe ourselves in the light, opening ourselves for what's to come. Thank you to Abby Warnberg, aka my mom, for lighting the candles. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel yom tov. Amen.
Amen.
Blessed are you, eternal our God, force of the universe, who has made us holy with your mitzvot, commanding us to light the festival light. Chag Sameach.
Please turn to page 3 for Kadesh, or in English, making holy. The first 2 steps of the Seder, Kadesh and Orchatz, create a doorway by which we can leave behind the busy outer world and enter into a more reflective inner world. Time and space circumscribe our lives. To sanctify time, we recite Kiddush, and to prepare our bodies and our physical space, we wash our hands. Wine inaugurates the holy day as it does all Jewish festivals. It elevates our meal, turning the act of eating into a sacred and joyful occasion. We drink wine to make time holy. As free people, our time is our own and we can spend it as we wish. Slaves are deprived of this freedom. On Passover, we drink 4 cups to soften our edges and dissolve any blocks to our happiness and our freedom. The first cup is dedicated to the earth and its indigenous stewards, the land that supports us and nourishes us and gives us life.
See if I can make my camera right while I rise for Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am ורוממנו מכל לשון וקידשנו במצוותיו. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה, מועדים לשמחה, חגים וזמנים לששון, את יום חג המצות הזה, זמן חירותנו מקרא קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי אלינו קראת ואותנו קידשת לעבודתך, ומועדי קודשך בשמחה ובששון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש ישראל והזמנים. Orchatz. Usually, when we are about to eat a meal, we wash our hands and recite a blessing as we wash. But here, since the meal is delayed until after our story, we'll refrain from blessing. Now we simply wash that we may enter the Seder with clean hands and a pure heart.
Karpas, greens from the earth. Please turn to page 7, karpas. Karpas refers to all the green vegetables, the parsley, arugula, or other greens on the table that sprout from the soil. It symbolizes the vibrant, verdant energy of spring, of life's urge to break through the dry earth. It reminds us that the freedom to just be, to express one's inner nature, is the most essential freedom. The salt water into which we'll be dipping the karpas represents our sweat and tears as slaves and symbolizes the sea out of which we and all our creaturely ancestors evolved. Our tradition has special blessings for grains, vegetables, and fruits, our most basic and earthy foods. Plants sustain people and animals alike. Like plants, we are born of the earth. The Hebrew language teaches this. The only difference between human, Adam, and earth, Adamah, in Hebrew is the letter He. As we say the words from the blessing, Borei Peri Ha'adamah, we express our gratitude for the earth. So join me to dip a green vegetable in salt water and we'll recite together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri ha'adamah. Blessed are you, eternal our God, force of the universe, creator of the fruit of the earth.
David, you're muted. Please unmute.
Can you hear me? Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Great. So please turn to page 9, Yachatz, or in English, splitting. Matzah is the central symbol of Passover. Matzah is the simplest of all foods, wheat and water, humble pie. It's parched, dry, and unassuming, like the desert here where I live. Passover is the path back to basics, the earth, the wheat, and the water, and our essential selves. For 7 days each spring, Passover calls us to drop our attachment to a culture that wants to fill us up with all the products of the marketplace. Passover teaches that freedom comes when we rid ourselves of the burden of just too much, too much. So we'll break the middle of the 3 matzah into 2 pieces. Great. and return the smaller one back to the pile, and we set aside the larger piece as the afikoman. The broken matzah is a symbol of slavery, of brokenness. Some of us may have broken with our past. We might have lost our sense of history and a connection to our ancestors. Others may have broken from our earthly home. We may have lost touch with the more than human natural world around us that gives us so much every day. In this year of the pandemic, many of us feel especially broken. So let's take a moment to reflect on how you have felt broken this year. And if you're comfortable, when you're comfortable, just share a bit of what comes to mind in the chat. The Seder it's a ritual of integration. But first we have to feel what's broken in us and how broken off we are from what matters. Great. So yes, it's a gathering, a ritual of integration. And it helps us to retrieve these lost parts of ourselves and remember ourselves to the earth that we may become whole again. The whole matzah represents wholeness and freedom. It's the food of liberation, what the Israelites ate as they hurried out of Egypt.
We're on page 11, Magid, or the telling. The word haggadah derives from the Hebrew word lahagid, which means to tell. It is related to the word magid, which means story or telling. The haggadah tells the story in many ways, through questions and answers, biblical narratives, ritual foods, a game of hide and seek, and in psalms and songs. By including multiple tellings, the Haggadah models the Seder as an open-ended conversation where many points of view are respected and included. Everyone is invited to contribute to the telling. The telling of a story begins with wide open arms. The Seder bids us to invite those who are hungry to partake of our meal. It also bids us to invite those who are hungry in spirit. Those who are lonely, lost, heartsick. We bring everybody into the circle, regardless of gender, age, race, and religion. The freedom we aspire to depends on our sharing.
In many ways, friends, the journey through the Seder, the journey of the Haggadah is the journey from slavery to redemption, and it follows matzah. We begin, in a sense, with matzah, which is the bread of affliction, he lachmanya, and by the end of the Seder, this matzah is alchemically transformed into the bread of freedom, he lachmanya. I'm going to sing it in the Judeo-Arabic tradition, the Judeo-Iraqi tradition. We have a custom of singing it 3 times. I'll just sing it twice, but we kind of, if you like, fluctuate between the Aramaic and the Judeo-Arabic. He lachmanya. He lachmanya, this is the bread of affliction that our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. All who are hungry, come and eat. All who are in need, come and enjoy the Pesach meal. He lachmanya, diachalu abhatana be'ar'ad Misraim. كل دخفين يثوي يخول كل دصريخ يثوي يفسخ هشتاخا לשנה הבאה בארעד ישראל, השטח עבדי, לשנה הבאה בארעד ישראל, بني حورين هذا خبز المسكين الذي يقلوا بحياتنا في بلد مصر كل جوعان يجي وياكل كل معتاز يجي ويفسخ هل سنة نحن هون سنة الجاية في بلد إسرائيل هل سنة نحن هون عبيد سنة الجاية في بلد إسرائيل بنين المتلوقين هي لحمانيا دي خلو أبهثانا بعرعاد مصرايم كل دخفين يثوي يخول كل دسريخ يثوي يفسح هشتاخا ليش أنا هبقى بأرعى دي إسرائيل هشتاخا عبدي ليش أنا هبقى بأرعى دي إسرائيل بني حورين هذا خبز المسكين الذي يأكلوا بحاثنا في بلد مصر كل جوعان يجي وياكل كل معتاز يجي ويفسخ هل سنة نحن هون سنة الجاية في بلد إسرائيل هل سنة نحن هون عبيد سنة الجاية في بلد إسرائيل بنين المتلوقين.
Thank you so much, George. That was really beautiful. The Seder continues now on page 14 with 4 questions about the special Pesach foods and table rituals. The experience of eating points us back to our food's origins, the land. Farmers and people who live close to the land can even identify the place of the food's origins by its particular taste, its terroir. The freedom we aspire to on Passover begins with the ability to ask questions, to think beyond the narrow confines of what we already know or believe. The 4 questions provide a prompt for us to ask our own questions. What are you contemplating tonight? What questions do you have? Feel free to take some time to share your own questions in the chat, and you can feel free to do that all evening. Okay. Pouring here a 2nd cup of wine, which I invite you to do too. And then we'll turn to Noah to ask the 4 questions. Take it away, Noah.
מה נשתנה הלילה הזה מכל הלילות, מכל הלילות, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים חמץ ומצה, חמץ ומצה, הלילה הזה כולו מצה, הלילה הזה כולו מצה, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים שאר ירקות, הלילה הזה מרור, הלילה הזה מרור, שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים מטבילים, אפילו פעם אחת אפילו פעם אחת, הלילה הזה, הלילה הזה, שתי פעמים, הלילה הזה, הלילה הזה, שתי פעמים, שבכל הנילות אנוכי, בין יושבים ובין מסובים, בין יושבים ובין מסובים, הלילה הזה, הלילה הזה, כולנו מסובים, הלילה הזה, הלילה הזה, כולנו מסובים.
Good job, Noah.
All right, please turn to page 14, which is the page you should be on, physical slavery. The ancient rabbis had various ideas about the meaning of slavery and freedom. Some of them understood slavery as physical bondage and said that slavery began with Pharaoh. The Torah tells us we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, but God brought us out of there with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. So we begin our journey as slaves in Egypt. Pharaoh owned us. He treated us like a commodity. He stripped us of power and the ability to make decisions. Pharaoh, in this story, has no name. He is simply Pharaoh of Egypt. We all lose our identity and humanity when state slavery prevails, even Pharaoh. Slavery is not something that occurred at one time in the past. Slavery in the US did not end with the abolition in the 19th century. It simply changed forms. Slavery is found wherever people have no free choice and are controlled by their exploiters. Women forced into prostitution, men forced to work at hard labor, children forced to work in sweatshops, girls forced to be with older men, all are forms of slavery. 40.3 million people live in slavery worldwide today. The Jewish American poet Emma Lazarus wrote, "Until we are all free, we are none of us free." Consider what Emma Lazarus's words mean to you today. And if you would like, you can share your thoughts in the chat.
Please turn to page 21, Spiritual Slavery. The slavery in the Haggadah does not just refer to physical bondage. We were slaves long before Pharaoh. Ever since Abraham, we have been plagued by an insidious kind of slavery, a slavery of the mind and spirit. Our earliest ancestors worshipped idols. They were enslaved to the popular ideas of their times. Rav Kook wrote, "The difference between a slave and a free person is not just a matter of social position. We can find an enlightened slave whose spirit is free and a free person with the mentality of a slave. Real freedom is that uplifted spirit that inspires the individual to remain true to their inner essence. A person with a slave mentality lives life according to other people's measure of value. Whatever we raise up on a pedestal and revere too much, these are our idols: power, wealth, beauty, science, politics, the intellect, technology, ideologies. None of these values are negative in and of themselves. It's a matter of proportion. When we dwell continuously on any one belief, such that we become blind to other possibilities, then we are in a state of idolatry. Idolatry is the most dangerous form of slavery because we are often oblivious to the idols that we worship. Take a moment to consider how you feel enslaved or how you enslave yourself. and we welcome your reflections in the chat.
We're on page 23. The traditional haggadah draws a sharp distinction between oppressor and oppressed, the Egyptian overlord and the Israelite slave. While our world is plagued by such stark imbalances of power, I find myself preoccupied with the way that our society locks us, its beneficiaries, into oppressive roles. My daily routine is sustained by the ceaseless extraction and burning of fossil fuels. When I take stock of this, I want to cry out to God, not as an enslaved Israelite, but as an Egyptian, sickened by the destructive power entangled in my hand. Going back to the land, learning to grow a large portion of my family's food with regenerative techniques, drawing sustenance from the parcel of earth where we make our home, while also doing my best to restore it as habitat to birds and bees, bear and butterfly, has felt in this regard like liberation.
This poem is called North and South. Don't underestimate your need to cross the line. Frozen on the wrong side of your desire to remake the world in the inverted mirror of your otherness, how can you be true to the truth of being human, something that bends in a universe that doesn't, a blend of guts and spirit, responsibility and shame? You are only an inch from the constantly moving source of life. No matter how passionately you stuff your body into the two tight boxes, male or female, north or south, poor or rich, white or some other socially demarcated shade, you check because you are scarred by the lines that keep you safe from more complicated combinations. And you know no one will mind. You don't have the guts to tell the truth as long as you stay on your side of the line.
Shalom from Jerusalem. I want to invite you all to remember to use our mouth as a tool of creation, as a gate of redemption. Mouth, mouth, mouth. Pe, pe, pe. Mouth, mouth, mouth. Pe, pe, pe. Speaks, speaks, speaks. Sa, sa, sa. Speaks, speaks, speaks. Sa, sa, sa. Mouth speaks. Pe, sa. Mouth speaks. Pe, sa. As Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai mentioned, the mouth is like a fountain, and the river goes from Eden to water the garden. ונהר יוצא מעדן להשקות את הגן. ונהר יוצא מעדן להשקות את הגן.
The Song of Songs. The Song of Songs gives us a guide, an inner guide for this journey to freedom, to love, and to the land that is beneath our feet, ready to nourish us and send us. And so the Song of Songs says, Kumilach. First of all, get up, raise up your consciousness, raise up the energy inside you. Kumilach rayati afati, the way that we will enter through to that place of freedom is through friendship and through beauty. Kumilach rayati afati olachilach, go to yourself, go to the inner place within that will connect you. So let's chant this together so that we can really be on the journey together. Kumilach rayati afati, Kumilach rayati afati, Kumilach rayati afati, Kumilach rayati afati, Lechilach, 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 go. Lechilach, 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 everyone. Kumilach rayati afati, Kumilach rayati afati, Kumilach rayati afati, Kumilach rayati afati, Lechilach, 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 Lechilach. Give it all you've got. Kumilach rayati afati, Kumilach rayati afati, Kumilach rayati afati, Kumilach rayati afati, Lechilach, 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 Lechilach,
The second cup. We are now on page 46. I'm sorry. No, Shefa Gold. We've concluded our story, and now we drink another cup to begin our meal.
Excuse me.
Sorry, you're in the wrong spot. Ellen, you're up next.
We're on page 25, everybody, and thank you so much for those beautiful poems and music. Shefa, Victoria, Joy, absolutely gorgeous. Thank you. We're on page 25. According to the earliest rabbis, we're heading into the central part of the Seder right now. According to the earliest rabbis, the primary requirement for fulfilling the Passover obligation was the recitation of the biblical passage that begins, "My father was a wandering Aramaean." This passage is the beating heart of the Seder, recited as pilgrims brought the first fruits of the new year to the ancient temple. It crystallizes the moment when the people would would enact their embrace of the covenant, offering back to God the bounty of the land. Yet the traditional Haggadah omitted the last two verses of this passage that the earlier generation of rabbis suggested that we read. These overlooked verses point to the centrality of land in the Bible and provide a deep ecological context to the central Jewish story. I've reclaimed and embellished these verses in this Haggadah. Please follow along, beginning on page 26 through 34, as we recount this story together, and pay attention to the way that land and weather circumscribe our lives. So we start with Lori.
My father was a wandering Aramean. Our ancient ancestor Jacob was known as a wandering Aramean because his mother Rebekka came from Aram. The family was semi-nomadic, herding sheep and cattle in the lands near Canaan. Jacob had 12 sons and 1 daughter. Jacob loved Joseph best and gave him a stunning coat that Joseph would flaunt. Joseph's siblings could not endure him. They threw him into a pit and left him for dead. A caravan came along and pulled Joseph out, and he was sold to the Egyptians. Joseph fared well in Egypt, but after a palace intrigue with Potiphar's wife, he was thrown into a dungeon, another pit. Joseph was a dreamer and an interpreter of dreams. His ability to interpret dreams got him out of that pit. He interpreted Pharaoh's dreams of fat and lean cows and healthy and scorched corn as symbolic of an eerie weather event that would befall Egypt. 7 years of plenty followed by 7 more of drought. Joseph's foresight would save the empire. The Egyptians could bank the excess grain during the years of plenty to provide for the years of drought. Pharaoh rewarded Joseph for his good judgment and crowned him second in command over the entire empire.
He went down to Egypt with few numbers and sojourned there. The 7 years of plenty came and went. Then came the famine. It extended all the way up to Canaan, but Egypt still had grain. Joseph's brothers traveled down to Egypt to secure food for their family. In Egypt, the brothers met Joseph. They didn't know that it was him, but he knew it was them. Joseph toyed with them. He wanted his brothers to pay for the wickedness towards him all those years ago. But in time, Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. Meanwhile, the land of Canaan had become a wasteland, and the family's crops had withered. 5 more years of famine lay ahead. The clan had to leave their home in Canaan and move to Egypt or starve. The weather, and particularly drought and famine, have always determined where and how our people lived.
And there he became a great nation, mighty and numerous. When our ancestors arrived in Egypt, Joseph assigned them lush and fertile grounds where they could grow their crops and pasture their sheep. They worked hard and contributed to the Egyptian economy. They were fruitful and multiplied, and their homes were noisy with exuberant children. Many years passed, and a new Pharaoh arose who did not know Joseph. He fancied himself a god, creator of all life. The throngs of Israelites aggravated him. He was afraid that they would rise up and join foreign armies against him.
Those who lived in the tight places that was then called Egypt, they dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed hard labor upon us. Pharaoh tried to crush our mushrooming clan. Our people were subhuman to him. He forced us to make bricks for storage cities to stockpile the excess grain. Grain was the basis of the economy in Mitzrayim. An empire could amass vast amounts of it, and as long as there was a place to store it, the empire could become enormously rich. The richer Pharaoh grew, the greedier he grew, and the more he oppressed our people. With no one in the court to look out for our ancestors and no land to call their own, our people were outsiders, aliens. Displaced and landless, we gradually became slaves. And Mitzrayim, the most powerful empire in the world, grew rich off the work of our hands. Still, this wasn't enough to placate Pharaoh. He ordered the killing of the firstborn boys. But the grandmothers, the midwives, Shifra and Pua, resisted. They defied Pharaoh, saving as many babies as they could, ensuring our future.
We cried out to Adonai, the God of our ancestors, and Adonai heard our plea and saw our affliction, our misery, and our oppression. It seemed as if we had been slaves in Egypt for an eternity. We were demoralized and depressed and could not imagine being free. Then we remembered a story told by our grandparents. We would suffer terribly in a foreign land for 400 years, but in the end, God would take us out and we would inherit a land we could call our own. The story gave us hope, and finally, we found our voice. With all our strength, we cried out to God, the one who created heaven and earth. It was as if the depth of our despair, coupled with a faith in an unseen God, stimulated a response. Something shifted, something we will never know or understand.
Then Adonai took us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with awesome power, with signs, and with wonders. The God our ancient ancestors worshipped, a God who we could barely imagine at the time, appeared out of nowhere, creating havoc throughout Egypt with one frightful plague after another. Bloody water, croaking frogs, dead beasts. All of creation seemed to be convulsing in rage at Pharaoh. Join me on page 30, and we'll recite the 10 plagues together. In a lot of Ashkenazi families and communities, folks are used to taking a small dip of a finger out of their cup of wine to show the reduction of their happiness. In my family, we come from Iran, and we actually would pour from the leader's wine into the hand washing bowl when we do this. Dam. Blood. Svardeya. Frogs. Kinim. Lice. Arov. Flies, insects, and wild animals. Dever. Pestilence. Shchin. Boils. Barad. Hail. Arbe. Locusts. Choshech. Darkness. Makat Bechorot. Striking down the firstborn Egyptian sons. God could have sent an army to overthrow Pharaoh, but God called on creation to convey the message. The plagues perverted the entire natural order. God had created the earth and all its creatures. Now God was undoing creation in Pharaoh's corner of the world.
Maybe the plagues had some basis in natural phenomena. You can imagine the first plague, dam or blood, as red clay washed down from the highlands during the heavy rains, reddening the Nile and fouling the water. The muddy waters would kill the fish. The frogs, crowded out of their habitat by the dead fish, would seek the coolness of human homes. That's the second plague. The frogs would die indoors, providing food for lice and flies, which would multiply, creating the third and fourth plagues. The lice and flies would give rise to a pestilence that could infect animals and cause boils in people, being the fifth and sixth plagues. Our current ecological disasters are reminiscent of the biblical plagues. Here's just one example. When we burn too much fossil fuel for energy, we send excess heat into the atmosphere. The excess heat can lead to droughts, which kill off the insects and dry up the vegetation. The dry vegetation provides fuel for forest fires. The fires burn down the trees, which hold the soil in place, and the soil starts sliding, causing catastrophic mudslides, destroying homes and killing people, which is exactly what's been happening in California over the last many years. The plagues are really a lesson in interdependence, the fundamental teachings of ecology, that all creatures live together in a sacred web, and what befalls one has consequences on all the others.
Adonai brought us to this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Through all this, our faith in this unseen God, the creative universal life force, began to grow. When we were finally able to imagine ourselves as a free people in our own land, our collective energy seemed to well up. Maybe we even roused the east wind. It blew so hard that it split the Red Sea. The waters opened up like a birth canal, and we fled from Egypt and crossed safely to the other side. Getting out of Egypt was not the hardest part. We would spend 40 years wandering in the wilderness before we could receive a land where we could set roots, grow our own food, and finally be free. It would take all that time to heal from the condition of slavery that we inherited in Egypt. In Egypt, Pharaoh owned and exploited the land and everything in it, the fruit trees, the animals, the gold deposits, and us. In Pharaoh's ownership economy, people and creatures were commodities to be bought and sold. In a system of ownership, ultimately everyone becomes either an owner of others or someone that is owned. If we were going to inherit a land of our own, we would need to honor the dignity of all people, all creatures, and the land. God freed the Israelites not just for our sake, but for the sake of the entire creation. The land and its creatures belong to God. We could not own the land because land has a life of its own. We were to treat the land as a commons that everyone could share and enjoy together, just as we all share the air. We were to see ourselves as God's tenants, guests on the land. God took us to the wilderness to teach us this. The hardest lesson for us to learn was that the land could not be guaranteed. If we neglected the land's need for rest every seventh year, if we forgot the Sabbath, if we avoided giving to the poor or hoarded the land or its produce, our behaviors would reverberate in the land, and one day the land may not be able to endure our indifference any longer. The land may have no recourse but to spew us out. If we wanted to dwell freely in the land for generations, we would have to learn what agrarian peoples have always known, that caring for land is a matter of life and death. It requires dedication, perseverance, and love.
Now I bring the first fruits of the soil which you, Adonai, have given me. When we finally arrived in the land, we cultivated the soil and we pastured our sheep. We planted seeds and we tended our crops. When the vineyards bore first grapes and the fields were plush with grain, we were overjoyed and we were grateful. We brought our first fruits back to God, to the land itself. We knew that the land did not belong to us, that we belonged to the land. We understood that we live in a natural cycle of interdependence with God. God gives to us, we receive Goddess's gifts and bring back to Goddess. The act of bringing our fruits to God completes the cycle of giving and receiving and stimulates more giving. The cycle of God-human energy flows, mirrors the cycles of nature.
Today we know the profound importance of the land. Farmed properly in traditional ways, the land itself is one of our best defenses against the threat of climate change. Building topsoil with humus, adding organic material, minimizing soil disturbance, avoiding chemical fertilizers and pesticides, and safeguarding the ground with perennials or cover crops will, over time, increase soil carbon.
Please join us now on page 36 for the song Dayenu. Passover encourages us to distinguish between more and enough. More wealth, comfort, and convenience often stimulates the desire for even more wealth, comfort, and convenience. Dayenu, which literally means it would have been enough, teaches us instead that when we take a moment to feel satisfied with what we already have, and to recognize that we are blessed with not just enough, but with more than enough, we find ourselves freed from the illusion that we need more. Dayenu joyfully proclaims, we have enough. We have enough. Consider ways you can simplify your lives to live more in tune with the balance of nature. Please share your thoughts in the chat.
I'm going to sing Dayenu in the Judeo-Iraqi tradition. Again, just those of you who read Hebrew, just watch for some of the differences in the consonants. Some of the letters are different. They are closer in some ways to Arabic, so you'll be able to hear that and pick it up, hopefully. كما ما علو ثبوت لما كم علينو إلو هوسيانو من مصرايم ولو عسابهم الشفاطيم داينو إلو عسابهم الشفاطيم ولو عساب إلوههم داينو إلو عساب إلوههم ولو حرق بخورهم دينو إلو حرق بخورهم ولو نثلانو إتمامنا دينو إلو نثلانو إتمامنا ولو قرلانو إتحيام دينو إلو قرلانو إتحيام إلو قرلانو إتحيام ولو عبيرانو بتخو بحاربا اللينو إلو عبيرانو بتخو بحاربا ولو شق صرينو بتخو دينو إلو شق صرينو بتخو ولو سيبك سرحينو بمدبار 40 شنا دينو إلو سيبك سرحينو بمدبار 40 شنا ولو يخيلانو إث حمان دينو إلو يخيلانو إث حمان ولو نثلانو إث حشباث دينو إلو نثلانو إث حشباث ولو كربانو لفني حار سناي دينو إلو كربانو لفني حار سناي ولو ناتان لانو إتحاتو را دينو إلو ناتان لانو إتحاتو را ولو يحنسانو لإرس إسرائيل دينو إلو يحنسانو لإرس إسرائيل ولو بانا لانو بيت المقداش داينو.
Please join us on page 39. Just as we think that we've said everything that needs to be said, Rabbi Gamliel comes to remind us that we haven't completed our task until we've reflected on the special foods on the Seder plate that tell the story.
The Pesach lamb, or beet, why did we eat it long ago? It is the Passover offering to God because God, Pesach, passed over the houses of our ancestors, sparing them when God struck the Egyptians.
This matzah, why do we eat it? It recalls the dough of our ancestors, which did not have time to rise. Matzah is the bread of haste. Poet Marge Percy wrote, "If you aren't prepared when an opportunity comes for liberation, you must take it anyhow. If you delay, if you procrastinate, then you will probably lose the moment in which you might act."
This maror,
from our own garden,
we dug it up last week. Why do we eat it? It reminds us that the Egyptians embittered the lives of our ancestors.
There are other foods on the Seder plate. We've discussed the karpas, the green vegetable. There's a second bitter herb, chatzeret, romaine lettuce. It was like our experience in Egypt, sweet at the beginning of the season and increasingly bitter as it went on. The burnt egg stands for the roasted holiday sacrifice and reminds us of spring, birth, and renewal. Finally, there is the charoset, the muddy yet delicious mixture of apples, nuts, honey, wine, fruits, and spices that signifies the mortar used for cementing bricks for Pharaoh's storehouses.
Today, many of us add more items to the Seder plate that speak to contemporary issues. On many Seder plates, an orange, originally a tangerine, honors the place of women, gays, lesbian, trans people, and anyone who feels marginalized. It symbolizes the fruitfulness that they bring to the world.
On page 42, Rabbi Nachman said that the exodus from Egypt occurs in every human being, in every era, in every year and in every day. Not only were our ancestors redeemed by the Holy One, blessed be, but we too were redeemed with them. As it says, God took us out from there in order to bring us and to give us the land that God pledged to our ancestors. B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. In every generation, each person is obligated to see themselves as if they personally went out from Egypt. And so if your matzah is still open, we cover it back up. And we lift up our cups, offering, let's see if I can get that clear, offering a toast to God. There we go. And we'll recite together. Therefore, we must thank, sing hallelujah, praise, exalt, elevate, beautify, bless, lift up, and loud the one who worked all these wonders for our ancestors and for us. Let's sing for God a new song. Hallelujah.
So it is time to celebrate. Once we get across that sea, we don't start going into the wilderness. We sing, we dance, and our song has ended a kind of a formula for how we're gonna take this journey to freedom. It says, Ozi, I have to call up all of that strength in me. V'zimeratiya, and I want to open to the song of God singing through me. Vayihilili shua, that will be my salvation. Sing with me. Ozi, v'zimeratiya, Leshua, Ozi, Lezimaradia, Leshua, Ozi, Lezimaradia, Simanaria, my healing, Yeshua, Ozi, Simanaria, my healing, Yeshua, Ozi, Simanaria, my Yeshua, Ozi, Simanaria, my Yeshua,
The second cup. We are on page 36 and we've concluded our story, and now we drink another cup to begin our meal. The second cup is dedicated to water, the circulatory system of our bodies and the earth. In Hebrew, the words for pool of water and blessing share the same root letters. Water is the source of blessing. Let us bless and drink at least half the second cup of wine while reclining to the left, and we'll recite together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Blessed are you, eternal Lord God, force of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. Amen.
Graza, hand washing. We are on page 46. Water is the element of transformation. According to the Hebrew blessing for hand washing, when we wash our hands, we elevate them. Through the actions of our hands, we bring holiness to the world. Take a moment to wash your hands. I'm doing it on my left. Now, if you don't have water next to you, lift or wave your hands, since the Hebrew word for wash literally means lift. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al natilat yadayim. Blessed are you, eternal our God, creator, force of the universe, who makes us holy by commanding us to wash, to lift up our hands.
We're on page 48. Motzi, bringing forth bread from the earth. I'm holding up all three matzot, two whole ones, top and bottom, and the broken one is in the middle. Bread in all cultures is the staff of life. Lechem in Hebrew refers not only to the bread, but to all food, and we recite the blessing for bread before any meal. We are blessed to inhabit a world in which the grasses of the field become the bread that sustains our lives. And we recite together, Brucha at Shechina Eloteinu Ruach HaOlam, Hamotzi Lechem Min Haaretz. Blessed are you, source of all life, force of the universe, the spirit of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. We put down the lower matzah. That will be used for the Hillel sandwich. Continue holding the top and middle matzah for the next blessing. We depend upon other creatures, both animal and vegetable. To stay alive, we take from the natural world. And when we do this with reverence for life, it is a blessing, a giving back to the one. But when we do it thoughtlessly or greedily, it is a desecration, a diminishment of the one. As you taste the matzah, taste it as if for the first time. Notice that the matzah's texture, its crunchiness, its lightness, its burnt edges. Remember where the matzah came from, berries of wheat sown in the ground, watered by the rains, nurtured by the sun. Brucha Ashchina Eloteinu Ruach HaOlam, Asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. Blessed are you, Holy One, the Spirit of the universe, who makes us holy, commanding us to eat matzah. And so break the matzah. Once again, making a mess on your table with holy crumbs, and eat while reclining to the left.
We continue with back to the bitter herb. If you can join us on page 50. We start with the horseradish root. We regard it. It's so gnarly and fleshy and earthy. Horseradish is a bitter root. It symbolizes the bitterness of slavery. It reminds us of the ways our own bitterness enslaves us still. At the Seder, we do not eat maror by itself. We dip the maror, the grated horseradish, into the muddy-looking charoset, transforming the bitterness of slavery into some sweetness, into a surprisingly delicious treat. So I'm going to invite you, and also on behalf of all, I'm going to take some slices of bitterness and wrap it in the lettuce, the chazeret of bitterness, and add this sweetness. And together we'll say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror. Blessed are you, our eternal God, force of the universe, who makes us holy by commanding us to eat the maror, the bitter herbs.
Amen.
Page 51, Korach, wrapping. In ancient times, Rabbi Hillel made a wrap of the essential Passover foods. In those days, matzah was soft and pliable. To honor Hillel, to honor the temple, the Beit HaMikdash, to honor our time of freedom in the past, we build a Hillel wrap or sandwich, matzah topped with maror. For my Syrian ancestors, that would be lettuce. And for me, dandelions. And charoset, for my family, that would be date jam. And we've already said a blessing for them, so no blessing is needed. The Hillel sandwich blends these three Seder foods into one. When we unite disparate parts into one whole, we help redeem the world. Once more, we are transforming the meaning of our matzvah. Here's my maror, my charoset, and my sandwich.
This piyut, this liturgical poem that we are going to sing, chant for you, is found only in Iraqi Haggadot. Wa'amartem zebach pesach hu l'Adonai, and you shall say it is the Passover offering for Havaya. ثرثوا لقموا ولجروح في الثين برثوقهم المستعين بالله المني معير الشباح لعلوة بخو تباخ وأمارة مذبح פסח הוא לאדוני ואמרת מזבח פסח הוא לאדוני הרימו כל שירים שמחו בליל שימורים על מסוף ומרורים אכלו ושתו ייניים ואמרתם זבח פסח הוא לאדוני ואמרתם זבח פסח הוא לאדוני ראשון לכל ראשונים על יד סיר אמונים מיד כל מענים הציל כל המוני ואמרתם זבח פסח הוא לאדוני ואמרתם זבח מסתעין בי אללה سائل زخرتي وحسدا وسفرتي عاتا يعدعتي كي قادول أذوناي وأمرت مزبخ بسحه لأدوناي وأمرت مزبخ مستعين بي الله ككوخذي الشمايم من الشي وإفرايم يسومي مصرايم كل سباقات أذوناي وأمرت مزبخ بسحه لأدوناي وأمرت مزبخ مستعين بي الله هي لتوراتو لأمو وعدثو الشمرين صوعثو عنو شاب أدوناي وأمارة مزبخ كسحو لأدوناي وأمارة مزبخ مستعين بي الله إفلائي مع السخا وعصومي من السخا يمرو كل دول سخا تبلح صوت بأدوناي وأمارة مزبخ بسحو لأدوناي وأمارة مزبخ مستعين بي الله وأمارة مزبخ بسحو لأدوناي وأمارة مزبخ مستعين بي الله
That was amazing. Thank you, George. And we're indeed up to Barech, which is blessing at the end of the meal. So please join me on page 56. Gratitude isn't a passive stance. It's an act of generosity. When we offer thanks to God, we're returning to God a measure of that which has been given to us. We're saying thank you for the privilege of being alive. We're completing the cycle of giving and receiving. And we offer thanks not just for the food, al Amazon, but also for the land and the food, al Aretz val Amazon. Ooh, I just lost my page. And so together, hold on. Blessed are you, eternal our God, force of the universe, who in goodness feeds the whole world with grace, kindness, and compassion, who gives food to all flesh, whose kindness is forever. Baruch atah Adonai azanat hakol. Blessed are you, God, who nourishes all living things. We thank you, God, force of the universe, for giving us a beautiful, good, and spacious land. For it's written, you shall eat and be satisfied, and bless God for the good land that's been given to you. Baruch atah Adonai ala aretz val Amazon. Blessed are you, God, for the land and for the food. And handing over to Rabbi Arthur. Arthur, you're on mute.
Now?
Yes.
Mazel tov, mazel tov. So we've reached page 58 now. And we've also reached the third cup, which marks the completion of the meal and all the blessings, except the blessings over the last 2 cups of wine. This cup is dedicated to the air. And so I ask you to pause for a moment, just for a moment, to breathe, conscious that all our breath comes from all the living beings of the planet, from redwood trees and azalea bushes, from frogs, from sheep, all exchanging breath with each other. And simply by breathing, we pronounce, if you think it's possible to pronounce, the Yud Hey Vav Hey, without any vowels. For when you try with no vowels, what you hear is a breath. So we lift the cup and we, first in English, blessed are you, the breath of life, the interbreathing spirit of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. And there's another cup. This is the cup that marks our turning from marking freedom in the past to making freedom in the future. For it's the cup of the prophet Elijah, which is empty as it sits in the midst of our table, waiting for us to fill it. And this Elijah is the bearer of good news, symbolizing hope for the future, even when all earth is in danger. We echo from this last Shabbat, from the very last words of the last of the ancient Hebrew prophets, Malachi, invoking the God who says, there is a danger that my ruach, my breath, my wind might become a hurricane of utter desolation in the world. But I send you, the prophet Elijah, to turn the hearts of parents to children and the hearts of children to parents, the hearts of the elders to the youth and the youth to the elders, so as to heal the wound that is so endangering all earth and humankind. And today, the Sunrise Movement and Extinction Rebellion are the youth, the children, calling on those of us who are elders to respond, to make alliance between the generations. And we fill Elijah's cup to show that when the generations work together, when we all work together, we can create the besser Welt, the better world that our tradition yearns for and all of us reach for. So take a moment at your own table to pour a bit of your wine into the empty cup of Elijah, so that we all become Elijah. That is what needs to happen for us to move from marking the past to making the future.
Thank you, Reb Arthur. Thank you so much.
Amen.
Amen ve'amen.
We are on page 59. An empty cup symbolizing Miriam's well sits on the table. Legend tells that a magical spring of healing water known as Miriam's well accompanied the Israelites through the desert for 40 years. Miriam's cup is a reminder of all the women, Miriam, the midwives, Pharaoh's daughter, who maintained their faith, supported their communities, and continued to bear children against all odds. The Talmud says, if it were not for the righteousness of women of that generation, we would not have been redeemed from Egypt.
We fill Miriam's cup to remember that we were sustained by water and women and by our communities and our faith. This is a dancing song, Zot Kos Miriam. And while we dance, feel free to write your wishes for the world into the chat room. Feel free to get up and move. Zot Kos Miriam, Letziat mi Mitzrayim. Sing with me. Zot Kos Miriam, Letziat mi Mitzrayim. Yalla la 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 kos Miriam. 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 So kos Miriam, Letziat mi Mitzrayim. Zot kos Miriam, Letziat mi Mitzrayim. Yalla la 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 kos Miriam. 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 Kos Miriam. Mayim chayim zecher letziat mi Mitzrayim. And George, I believe you're up next. Sorry, I was singing, so I couldn't give you the heads up, but I believe you're up for Odecha. Odecha, Hallel.
Fill the fourth cup first. Ze hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismecha bo. This is the day that Adonai has made, Havaya has made. Let us exalt and rejoice in it. Odecha ki anitani. Ki anitani wathili lishua. Otcha ki anitani wathili lishua. Even ma'asu habonim hayta lerosh pina. Even ma'asu habonim הייתה לראש פינה מאת אדוני הייתה הזאת היא נפלאת בעינינו מאת אדוני הייתה הזאת היא נפלאת בעינינו זה היום עשה אדוני נחילה ונשמח בו זה היום עשה אדוני נחילה ונשמח בו Adonai Hoshiana Ana Adonai Hoshiana Ana Adonai Hoshiana Ana Adonai Hoshiana Ana Adonai Haslichana Ana Adonai Haslichana Adonai Haslichana Ana Adonai Hatzlichana Baruch haba b'shem Adonai Berachnuchem מבית Adonai Baruch haba b'shem Adonai Berachnuchem מבית Adonai El Adonai ויער לנו ישרוחר בעבותים עד קרנות המזבח אל אדוני ויער לנו ישרוחר בעבותים עד קרנות המזבח אלי אתה ועודך אלוהי ערוממך אלי אתה ועודך אלוהי ערוממך הודו לאדוני כי טוב כי לעולם חסדו הודו לאדוני כי טוב לעולם חסדו זה היום עשה אדוני נחילה ונשמח בו זה היום עשה אדוני נגילה ונשמח בו נשמת כל חי תברך את שמך אלוהינו נשמת כל חי תברך את שמך אדוני אלוהינו יאי 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 איי 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 Hi
Nishmat kol chai Tivarech et shimcha Eloheinu. Praise, praise, praise. Hallelujah. Praise, praise, praise. Hallelujah. Praise, praise, praise. Hallelujah. Praise, praise, praise. Hallelujah. Even Masu Habonim Hada Lerosh Even Masu Habonim Hada Lerosh So praise, praise, praise. Hallelujah. Praise, praise, praise. Hallelujah.
We're on page 63. The fourth cup is associated with the biblical phrase, I will take you to be my people and I will be your God. The relationship between God and people is an interdependent one, like all relationships in nature. So we're going to raise a cup for the last time and recite together, leaning to the left, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Blessed are you, eternal our God, force of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. And now we're on page 65. The Seder closes with the pronouncement, next year in Jerusalem. The ancient rabbis found deeper meaning in the words Jerusalem by dividing it into two components parts, Jeru or Yeru and Shalem. Yeru refers to awe, and Shalem, like Shalom, refers to wholeness and peace. We pray that all people everywhere stand in awe of the heavens and the earth and know the peace that comes from living lives of wonder. We pray that Jerusalem, the spiritual center for three great traditions, may experience the peace that its name promises. In the year to come, let us dedicate ourselves to make all our cities wholesome cities, cities of peace. And let us say, L'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim, next year in awe and peace. And I just want to shout out a big thank you to all of our readers and singers. This has been an incredible evening, way more than I would have ever expected possible. So thank you, everyone. We're going to conclude our service with George. and he'll be taking us out with the Ladino version of Who Knows When.
Che insupienze tendienze a lavare a Dio crienze, qualo ese uno, uno es el criador, uno es el criador, uno es el criador, Baruch hu Baruch Shemo. Che insupienze e tendienze a lavare a Dio crienze, ¿cuáles son los dos? ¿Cuáles son los dos? Dos Moshe y Aarón, uno es el criador, uno es el criador, Baruch hu Baruch Shemo. Que insupienze e tendienze a lavare a Dio crienze, ¿cuáles son los tres? ¿Cuáles son los tres? Tres nuestros padres son, dos Moshe y Aarón, uno es el creador, uno es el creador, Baruch hu Baruch Shemo. Que insupienze e tendienze a lavare a Dio crienze, ¿cuáles son los cuatro? ¿Cuáles son los cuatro? Cuatro madres de Israel, tres nuestros padres son, dos Moshe y Aarón, uno es el criador, uno es el criador, Baruch hu Baruch Shemo. Que insupienze e tendienze a lavare a Dio crienze, ¿cuáles son los cinco? ¿Cuáles son los cinco? Cinco libros de la ley, cuatro madres de Israel, tres nuestros padres son, dos Moshe y Aarón, uno es el criador, uno es el criador, Baruch hu Baruch Shemo. Que insupienze e tendienze a lavare a Dio crienze, ¿cuáles son los seis? ¿Cuáles son los seis? Seis libros de la Mishnah, cinco libros de la ley, cuatro madres de Israel, tres nuestros padres son, dos Moshe y Aarón, uno es el creador, uno es el creador, Baruch hu Baruch Shemo. Supienze e tendienze a lavare a Dio crienze, ¿cuáles son los siete? ¿Cuáles son los siete? 7 días con el Shabbat, 6 libros de la Mishnah, 5 libros de la ley, 4 madres de Israel, 3 nuestros padres son, 2 Moshe y Aarón, uno es el creador, uno es el creador, Baruch hu Baruch Shemo. Ya la 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 ya ra ra la 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 na 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 ya ra 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 ra. Uno es el creador, Baruch hu Baruch Shemo. Moadim lesimcha, everyone. Hag Sameach.
Sameach, everyone. Thank you again for being with us, for all of our special participants. We wish you a wonderful evening, a wonderful week, and a counting of the Omer, even though we can't do it together tonight. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, may we all be together again very, very soon. Thank you all so much and have a great evening. Shalom, lehitraot. And if you want to unmute and say shalom before we close the room, please do so.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody.
Shalom, shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom. Thank you, everybody.
Shalom. Shalom. Thank you.
Thank
Hi,
you,
Elliot.
Ellen.
Hi.
You're the best. Thanks,
Hi, Linda
Ellen.
Joe.
Don't forget to buy the haggadah.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
everybody.
Wait, who was that? That was Linda Doctor.
We all got the haggadah. Put up your haggadahs. Yeah, everybody's got to get this haggadah.
Yes.
Thank you all for being with us. We appreciate you
Thank
so
you.
much.
It's so great to see everybody.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you,
Ellen.
Ellen. The masterpiece.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Good to see everyone.
So beautiful, so wonderful.
Hey, Mary Rita.
Do it in person next year.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Shefa. Hey, Rachmiel.
Next
Thursday, Mary Rita.
Tomorrow for us.
Boy.
Tomorrow's good.
Oh, wonderful. We got a good report for tomorrow.
Good report.
George Mordecai is a treasure.
Oh my goodness.
He's a pleasure. Yeah. We're very blessed to have him back.
Yeah. Wow.
Thanks, everyone. Hag Sameach.
Sameach.